had a backup plan. And so I wound up taking this job because I thought I was going to be able to work with this guy. That is how I started my HR career.
All right, so a little fun fact. Who is the owner of Aerotech?
I don't remember the name.
Steve Biscotti, who happens to own the Ravens as well.
Is that true?
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
We trained in Baltimore for like a month and a half.
Yep, that's
that was
important.
Fantastic.
Yep, there you go. The Ravens, yes. I know that a dear friend of mine works for Aerotech or whatever their name is now. But yeah, okay, so you have this guy who you knew, but he kind of throws a little bit of the wrench in the plan, all right? So you go forward, you end up with...
No, he was in the New Orleans location, and I wound up working in the Houston, Texas location, and like I never saw him again.
So never the twain shall they meet. Okay, all right, but that began a new door, a new pathway.
Well, it's really funny. I always tell people that I believe that sometimes, things find you. There were a lot of curves and windy roads that had to happen for HR to find me and for me to find something that I was really passionate about. Had I not walked into that gym and saw him and had that conversation, I don't know what I would be doing. But the moment that I started that job, it was probably 2 days in, I knew that's what I was going to do. Like it was my life's work, and I was completely sunk at that point.
So you're in Houston, HR staffing, you're living in that world. What kind of work does that lead you into? Again, I'm thinking Houston, I'm thinking oil and gas industry. Are you supporting people in that industry?
Shell, Valak, and Valero. It was at the time that they were doing a transition from Windows NT. They were going into Windows NT from Novell. That's how long ago it is. This was like at the beginning of the internet. And
if you're young out there, you can Google that.
Right, and it was a really long path, but it was in oil and gas, Shell, Valero, Valak, Valero, Exxon, Chevron, inside of Houston. And I had an opportunity, and this is the weird thing about staffing, which is why I think it's so romantic. I had an opportunity.
I think that is the first time I've ever heard anybody take staffing and romance and put them together in the same sentence. Yeah, we're pausing to, yeah.
It's an opportunity to give people good news, and you are seen as the person that is the giver of the answer to prayer. It changes people's lives. So if you're interviewing, you need another opportunity, the opportunity you're in is not working for you, you have an opportunity to bring someone in and to place them in the job that could change their family situation. It could change their lives and their trajectory. That was extraordinarily romantic for me. And it's a bit of an addiction to be a bearer of really, really good news. And then my HR career wound up turning into administration and going into a place where I also wanted to protect people as much as I did wanted to bring them good news.
So you have that first start, Aerotech, you're in Houston, you get that great opportunity, you're giving good news. You keep moving forward, though, because I know we said 26 years in the HR industry. Where does that take you, going from Aerotech to where, and tell us a little bit about those steps in the journey, because I think when we hear a little bit about where you've gone as a founder, as a CEO, it will make a lot of sense.
Right. So I had a bunch of tiny jobs in between. Was at Aerotech and then decided to do a pivot. Took a small job in enterprise rental car, washing cars and picking people up. I did that for maybe about 6 months.
You are now the third really competent, amazing person I know that had that type of role.
It teaches you a lot about leadership and about pivoting as well. I did that. Then I went to work for a church, and I did staffing at a church. It was called the Power Center in Houston, Texas, under Windsor Village United Methodist Church. And then I went to Southwestern Bell and supported multiple states at Southwestern Bell, was promoted into a recruiter position in San Antonio, Texas, and that's where I was until 9/11. 9/11 happened, but also during that time, AT&T purchased Southwestern Bell at that time.
The Bell breakup and all the things happening there.
But I staffed bilingual call centers across 5 states, and during that period of time, I hired probably over 50, 60,000 people while I was a recruiter at Southwestern Bell.
50 or 60,000 people.
We were staffing in auditoriums, and we would have auditoriums set out like in Dallas and Oklahoma City. And I mean, we were doing some really fantastic work, but I hired tens of thousands of people during that time.
So you've seen short term, you've seen large numbers, you've seen some interesting pieces with that. You continue to propel forward, though. I mean, new things are happening. You're learning not only about the HR industry, but you're also learning more about businesses as a whole. When does grad school start to play into this?
It didn't play probably 10 years later that I decided to go back to get my MBA, but it was after I had HR certifications. By the time I started working on my MBA, I had already started getting ready to move back here.
Okay, so for those that are not in the HR world, those certifications are incredibly important. SHRM, the Society...
Human Resources Management.
I was like... Sorry, I gave it like a C in there, SHRM. Society for Human Resource Management, thank you. That's your bedrock. That's the bedrock of that industry. It is a credentialing entity. You're going through and
there are two. There's also Human Resources Certification Institute. That's where I got my SPHR, which was the first one. And then SHRM had their certification that came much, much later.
Okay.
And that's my SHRM SCP.
There's earlier stage, and then you don't get into your other till later stage?
Well, no, they were together, and then they split apart, and then SHRM started doing their own certification.
It was a breakup.
Right.
Oh.
It was a breakup.
We hate those stories.
They split
hard.
the house.
Oh, gosh, that's tough. Let's give a moment of silence
So
for
I
that.
did my certifications first, and then I went back to go get my MBA.
Okay. All of these things happening, moving forward, you end up in a couple different places, including Target.
Yep.
Okay, Target, corporate HR.
Yeah.
And then you end up doing something very interesting where you're in the shipbuilding industry.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So I worked at Target, and I was in Target in Mobile, but I was an employee relations resource over multiple locations. And then I went to work for Cintas, the uniform company.
They represent us here. Thank you, Demetrius and crew. You guys are great.
Fantastic
we love you.
Company.
If you want to give us a discount for that shout out, please let us know. You can sponsor the next one.
And worked at Cintas, and I had 4 locations at Cintas, and then I went to work in the shipyard, which is interesting because my dad is a seaman. My dad had been a seaman since he was 18 years old, and so I've been around shipyards my entire life. So when I went to go interview for that job, I told my dad, and he's like, "I'm so proud of you." He didn't even say that when I got my PhD, but when I went to work for the shipyard, he was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you worked in the shipyard." And for years, the only picture of me that he ever had in his wallet was me on a ship.
So that cements those things that are important in life, and probably a pretty cool full circle moment. Yeah, that's really neat. So you're working in the shipyard. You're learning a lot of lessons in there. You're seeing what that looks like. You're thinking about sometimes the transient nature. You're looking at hiring, firing, challenges, opportunities. When's the point where you go, I think I'd like to start my own company?
So I was already in the PhD program in South Alabama, and so I was working full-time, had a full team. We were supporting thousands at the shipyard, and I thought I was having a nervous breakdown. I mean, I went to a place where I couldn't remember the recipe for mashed potatoes. Like, my mind did like a total reset.
Buttermilk potatoes?
I don't understand what those things meant that day. Don Mosley was actually my professor at that time.
Shout out Mitchell College of Business.
He could tell you, like, I came to him like in tears, and I was like, something is happening with my health. I really don't know what's happening right now. I'm in overload. And went to a neurologist, and he said, your body is doing a reset. You've got to figure this out. You've got to let something go. You've got a full-time job. You've got a family. You've got school. You're going to have to get rid of one of them. So after thinking really hard about, could I get rid of my husband and children, I decided to
She loves you all. Trust me. She loves you. I'm going to reaffirm that. Most of the time, at least.
And then I left corporate and just made the decision to start a consulting company, because when I left, I missed HR too much. It was way too much knowledge, way too much information, and way too much passion to just walk away from it completely. So I decided to start up, and we actually built the company on the back of a Wendy's napkin driving back from New Orleans, me and my husband.
what great startup isn't built on the back of a napkin? That's a beautiful thing. I love that. In fact, one of our partners we work with here, Slingshot, they have a napkin that says the best thing since the back of the napkin. That's their slogan. So that's great. All right, I want to hit two things here because this is really interesting. You're coming through Mobile, Alabama as a kid, growing up here, Shaw High School, leave, go away. A lot of your professional life early on is happening out of here. Like, how do you go and become Dr. Wiggins? Because there's a lot that's there. And I mean, I think in a lot of ways, some of the same things that we think about in the startup space are very real as you go through a PhD program or a doctorate program of anything. How do you even have the confidence to do that?
So after I left Texas, I moved to Phoenix, Arizona. And I also lived in Los Angeles and Walnut Creek, California. And I lived in those places and worked in those places before I came back home. And I came back, very frankly, my grandmother had Alzheimer's. She called me and asked me if I could come home to take care of her. I got in the car, I came back home, and then, got married and had children when I got here. The confidence, well, there was none. There was no confidence. What I did know is that through my corporate experience and when I decided to go out on my own, I knew that smaller companies did not have the confidence to move forward in things that people think of regarding corporate America, like having robust performance management systems and understanding that they were doing what they were supposed to do regarding compliance and all of those little pieces, employee engagement, safety. And so I wanted to take all of this knowledge that I had inside of these really large corporate structures where I was on auditing teams and working with attorneys constantly, because in corporate America, you have access to attorneys 24 hours a day. And so I wanted to take some of those best practices and those lessons learned and provide them and make them accessible for small to mid-sized companies. And so it was not necessarily the confidence. I didn't even know if it was going to work out. I just knew that I had a skill set. I knew people needed it. And when I first left corporate America and I was like, hey, I'm starting a company if you need help, it was crickets. It was crickets for a really long period of time. And it was a huge struggle with me mentally, where I was used to being in really large companies and people knew my name and people were always answering the phone. They were trying to get on my calendar. If they see me somewhere, it's like, red carpet is rolled out. Oh, it's she that works at BAE, things of that nature. And then I left corporate America and I'm the same person with the same knowledge. And then I call and say, hey, I left, the company. I've started my own thing. This is what I do. And nobody returned your call.
So you're dealing with that, the real come to Jesus moment, we say in the beginning of that business. And I think so many founders can identify that. It's I've been preparing for this. I have been doing all this work. I'm ready. I go out.
Nothing.
Where's my customer? Why won't they return my calls? What's happening there? And so we see that. I think a lot of times the challenges that we see is that we hear about the survivors. We hear about the great successes, and we oftentimes don't hear about the pit of despair, or the trough of despair that we talk about in the startup world, which is like you're going and you're going to face those really, really hard times. And so, I was talking about this yesterday with some friends about the idea of endurance. And I mean, the same thing that gets you through a doctoral program, same thing that gets you through, if you're a runner, you're training, those kinds of things. It's building up that discipline and endurance. And so where does the breakthrough happen? Where's the breakthrough that all of a sudden we went from red carpet world where they love you in corporate, you're on your own and you're hearing crickets? Where do you start to see that transition?
So the transition happened, well, first of all, there were many days where I'm in the fetal position laying in the bed. I remember days where my husband would come into the room. I would have the shades drawn. I'm in the fetal position in the bed crying. He would rip the covers off me and say, get up and make some calls. Do some things that are uncomfortable. You can't sit here and do that. And so him being absolutely annoying pushed me to not feeling sorry for myself and just continuing to do something that made me uncomfortable every single day. And I just started networking like crazy, just letting people know who I was. And my husband is in sales. And so one of the things that he taught me really early on is nobody wants to buy from someone who's begging them to buy something from them.
Amen.
And so he said, you've got to find a way to sell without selling. And so something as simple as not, meeting somebody and giving them a full pitch every single time I meet them. Like, hi, I'm Gio. I have a company called Morale Resources, and we do human resources compliance. And, so where do you work?
I don't work. I just got fired.
Nobody wants to talk to that person. They're avoiding you like crazy.
Yeah.
And so I just took a different approach. Hi, I'm Gia. What do you do? HR? Oh, what kind of HR? Compliance?
What's that mean?
And so as they started, then it would kind of trigger something that they had a need for, and they want to have more of a conversation. And once they assumed that you were busy, then you must have clients, then maybe I want to have a conversation with you. It changed everything. That sales strategy changed everything for me. And then I did
Good
become
job,
busy.
Bart. Good job.
So then I did become busy. And so it was learning how to sell without making people feel like they were being sold. And so I had a really great skill set. I had something that I was bringing to the table. And also the other interesting thing was that I was selling something and providing a service or a solution that nobody else in our area was really providing at that time. And so my solution was, we're going to go in and I'm going to look at strategy. I'm going to look at everything nuts to bolts, figure out where your areas of risk are. And inside of taking care of that, we're going to put together a plan to get you from where you are right now to where you need to be. And we started that by doing audits. And I'd never met another person that did HR audits.
And this is interesting because I know in your own journey, we've talked a lot about different steps and stages, things that you've tried. In fact, even the name Morale Resource. Where were you trying to go initially with that?
So we had an engagement business.
Yes.
When I was in corporate America, we would do engagement boxes for birthdays and anniversaries. And so it was an engagement. It was a morale, but we're the resource. That's where it started off. And then I dropped that line and just kept the name and been looking for a new name ever since.
Okay, so that's a consulting business. That's a business that kind of built up into that, and you are the resource, and people are looking for you. And look, the reality is, if you're running a shop, if you're running a business, if you're running a service that you are the primary feature, you have bandwidth issues. Yeah. You have scalability issues, and so you most recently have taken a shift, and I got a chance to listen to you pitch this earlier today on an very exciting Zoom call. You're living in the world now of a SaaS platform. You mentioned you were doing the audit thing inside of Morale Resource. Mm-hmm. But you recognize something unique here. Tell us about that transition, okay? Because those are very different. I mean, even though the HR field is the same, even though you're still thinking about compliance and audits, and those two things are the same, there's a vast difference from being a consultant to now you're running a tech company. Take us into that.
Weird. So when I was doing the audits inside of Morale Resource and we were trying to provide solutions, I couldn't scale the business. So, had a customer over here, had a client over there, you'd have to travel. My audits were on an Excel spreadsheet at the time, and I would try to get consultants, find a consultant, train them on how to do these audits, and have them go to my client. And I had a really bad situation where one of the consultants I reached out to pretty much kind of made a copy of what my audits were and went to my customer that they were in front of and said, well, what is she charging you? I'll charge you less than that. So I knew that we couldn't do it. I had to find a solution that would allow me to be able to scale that business, because that business could have retired us, right? And retired a couple of generations in my family because of the price point. We were charging somewhere between $15,000 and $30,000 per engagement inside of that business. And so I needed to find
now
a way
you know
to
why
scale
she
it.
has adopted me into her family. So she's going to retire my generations too.
It was, I mean, it was good money in that consulting world. And so because of that, I had to find a way to make it so that we could scale the business. And so when we first built the solution, which is now called Auditocity, it was specifically so that I could let other consultants go out to do work for me. And it wasn't until we started talking about it that people were telling me, I'd do this if it was on a self-service model. And then I completely pivoted at that point and started building out with 300 grand of my own money and started building this business and trying to build out this SaaS platform so I could sell it.
So let's not overlook what you just said. You said my own money. So you're bootstrapping off of the proceeds and the profits from Morale Resource.
It was going to initially be a product line for Morale Resource.
Okay.
It was just an investment, and it wasn't until, I started talking to my legal counsel, shout out to Hunter Adams, we made the decision that we needed to turn it into its own S Corp. C Corp. And so that's when we decided to do something completely different with, but it was initially going to be a product line of the consulting company.
So now you're in a place that you have moved from you being the product to a real true product, a technology product that is, you're finding great partnerships. I don't know if you're able to talk about those at all or not, but you're finding some partnerships. And this is really interesting. So a lot of times when we talk to founders, it's figuring out what are the channels, what are the ways that they're going to connect to that customer, what's that customer relationship going to look like? So how do you get to the go-to-market strategy? Where did you kind of turn to in that regard?
So it's a couple of different things. So one, it's specifically in what we were doing. I was helping my clients by helping them find technical solutions that made sense for their business. So if they were super manual, the way for us to fix your product, your system, and then help you to make sure it's sustainable is to work with, sending you to an HCM, human capital management company, a payroll company, your ADPs, Paycor, Paylocities, UKGs, those types of systems. And so we were sending customers to them and saying, hey, they need a solution. Here's all the stuff. And then we were actually building systems and doing the integrations for them. So we had a lot of insight into the way that those HCMs worked and also their marketplaces and who their tech partnerships were. So when we were ready to go to market, the first place that I thought of is we need to go and try to do tech partnerships with some of these companies that I've been sending customers to for years, because I know that they have this need and they have nothing like this inside of their systems. And so it kind of lends a hand to what I always tell people: you need to know who your partners are, you need to know who your competitors are, and you need to know if there's a space in the market for specifically what you're trying to do. Because when I go and say, you do not have a solution like this, I mean it. I know they don't, because I'm in their systems every day.
So you've got 2 decades of prepping for this. And again, this is a really important piece.
Yeah.
Talk about this, share this often. It's a great model. In Brian Scordato, shout out to you, Tacklebox. I mean, dear goodness, I think we've got a ton of sponsors for this program just by our shout outs here, right? Okay. So Brian Scordato is a friend. Brian runs a company called the Tacklebox. And he works with founders primarily up in the New York area and kind of up in the upper Northeast. And he talks about there's a distinguishing factor between the whisper idea, where you're sitting across from somebody and you don't want everybody else to hear, so you lean in and you whisper. He says the whisper idea is the thing that, like, you're not really that equipped to do. You're afraid somebody's going to steal it. So if I whisper and I keep it under wraps for long enough, people can't copy it. And he says then there's the mountaintop experience or the rooftop experience, and that's where you're shouting out, I am doing this. It's because you're so uniquely equipped that people can't just jump in and steal it. It's the thing that you have been training for, you've been preparing for. It's part of what's happening there. And I think that's, 20-some years of experience to get you to the point that Auditocity is launching and it's moving forward. You're building partnerships. You've got some of the most prestigious companies in that space who now are looking at you and they're saying, we need what you've got.
Yep. So I think that regarding the Whisper campaign and the mountaintop experience, I think that there is a problem where people think that if I do a pitch to you, if I tell you what I'm doing, I need you to sign an NDA. when you get into larger spaces, they're not going to sign an NDA for a regular conversation, whether it be a VC or whether it be a partner. The only time that you actually have them sign an NDA is when you have to give them information that's a little bit under the hood. And so the whisper campaign is going to prevent you from growing. Because if you're whispering, then nobody knows that you're doing it. And the hardest thing that you can do is let people know that you're the expert inside of that space. So if you're afraid to share, how are people going to know that you're the person, you are the market leader inside of that space? So where those type of whisper conversations happen, that happens when someone's saying, well, how do you do that? Well, I'm not sharing with you how I do it.
I'm going to give you the secret sauce. That's it. Yeah.
I'm not telling you the secret sauce, but I'll tell you what I do, and I'll tell you I do it better than anyone else.
Look at that one. It's the only one live. Okay. All right. So we'll look at you then. Sorry, I've been showing you the ugly side of my face. Actually, both sides of the ugly side of my face. Sorry. So we've got that journey. It's happening. We see all this moving forward, and you're now in a unique position, okay? Because you're doing one of the most challenging parts of launching a business. You're building up your clients, you're building up your customers, you're recognizing how do you build the integrations. B, you're building out a really comprehensive software tool. And C, you're also raising capital. And raising capital is a full-time job. If you're a founder out there and you're living into that, it's one of the hardest things. So, one of the conversations we have often is like, if you're raising, then it's really hard for you also to be the CEO of your company. So having a really good team and systems in place is a really important part of that. So what does that look like?
Well, I mentioned that I put my own money in at the very beginning, and I had to figure out what was the most important thing. Did I need to get this product out? And if I needed to get the product out, I needed to have some significant money because it's expensive to build software. It's expensive to build an app. It's really expensive when you're building out a platform, especially that has regulatory,
I was going to say, and you're in a place where you're selling to corporates, which means trade shows and travel and all those kinds of opportunities in order to get in the door, build the relationships, and be able to move into that pipeline.
And an enterprise system where people are given very private information that they could be sued if the general public got that information. And so you've got more security and things of that nature in place. And so it's a lot. You have to have some funds in order to be able to do that. And so I had to make a decision if I was going to try to take on debt or if I was going to give away some equity. And so we had to put together a package and figure it out. And this was just me at the time. When I'm having conversations with large HCMs, and I'm talking about CEOs of publicly traded, Fortune 500 companies, it's me. They're like, tell me about your team. And I'm like,
let me tell you about my team. We're great. We're robust. We're amazing. We've got the best in every vertical you could ever imagine to take care of things. Oh, how many people are there? One.
It's one. And then I would count the contractors that we had working on the project to make us, like we were really big. But I didn't have anybody else that was specifically on the team with me, but I knew I needed to build. And so I had to put together a compelling conversation and a compelling package because I needed to raise money in order to build my team. And that's exactly what we had to do. So we we got a valuation, and I got the valuation from two groups, one that was in Texas, another one that was in Washington, D.C., and they gave us a really nice valuation. I think I called you after I got it. I was like, this is high, right? And then made the decision that I wanted to raise in Alabama, and I had to drop our valuation down by 2/3 in order for me to be able to raise here in our region because we weren't known nationally. But I knew that I had really solid relationships inside of our region. And so it was a difficult concept, but we had to make the decision to give away equity.
So, and that's an important conversation. Every founder needs to think about, it's part of why we have Money Fest on May 16th, is so that you can begin to think about that. If you're already profitable and your only thing that you need to scale is a little bit more working capital, then the debt solution may be the right opportunity. But if you're looking to make a huge move in regard to building building software, building team, and you need the strategic partnerships. That's where your equity really comes into play, and it becomes a great tool, great asset with you have the right partners. And so you were able to identify a lead investor who's been really helpful in that journey. He's been great in there and introducing you to others. More capital is starting to follow, opportunities to pitch. I mean, we talk about them often. They're coming more frequently, which is exciting. And so you're coming close to closing the round.
Yeah, we'll be closed with the round next month.
That's awesome. All right, tell us about what does the team look like right now? I mean, you've built trial and error opportunities. Where are you at in regard to size of your team?
So it's 5 of us that are full-time on the team right now. First person that I hired was someone that was going to be in charge of engineering. So his name is Nod Pradhan. He's actually in Menlo Park, California, which is where Meta is. Had worked at Capital One, worked at Fanatics Gaming. I wanted to find the person who was the best fit for me and what I needed, but also someone who had a startup background, because they understood that, hey, I'm poor right now, but, join me, please.
Stick with me, kid, and you'll never go hungry again.
Right, but I met him through Y Combinator, through a co-founder match, and he was like a fantastic person that was a match. The second person that I hired full-time on the team was a guy named Drew Schultens. He's out of Atlanta, and he is the head of operations and marketing, and he had worked for Equifax. Understood the piece, the regulatory piece, but these people had worked for really, really large companies. And since we were building enterprise software, I needed people with enterprise experience and knew how to manage teams, so that when we began to grow, they would know exactly what needed to do. And Drew's a huge Georgia Tech grad, huge process person, and so needed him on the team. Got a guy who does front-end development, Nick Magidson, he's in Pennsylvania, and then Michelle Alcathy, who helps write audits, and she's inside of the HR space, and she does an amazing job on having another HR person on the team. That was really, really critical. So that's our team right now, but that never could have happened for us to have these larger, because we're having large conversations right now. We've got some fantastic partnerships, but that couldn't have happened unless we built that internal team first.
That's huge. Gia, there's so much I think that we've taken in this morning. So many incredible pieces in your founder journey. I mean, again, the founder journey is not a direct route. It's something that takes a lot of twists and turns. We see the challenges of building the institutional knowledge as you work to apply into that field, understanding who the players are and what goes into that. All of those things are really important about how do you build the right team, how do you raise capital, all that. Gia, if you could leave one kind of thing to our audience as it relates to like just a major lesson learned that you would share to those earlier stage founders now, what would you say to them?
So I've got 2 things.
Okay.
One is make sure that whatever you're building, that you love it, because you're going to hate it. It will be the thing that will drop you to your knees. It's going to be the thing that's going to cause you to question everything in your life. You have no life because this is your baby. You sacrifice time with your family. Make sure it's something that you're really, really passionate about, because it takes a lot out of you and it's your identity. But the second thing is, I would say, make sure that you know that you have a solution for a problem. It's not good enough that, I think this is a thing. I know other people are making money doing it. I'm sure I can make money doing it too, unless you want to stay really small. But take the time, learn what the problem is, learn how many people are having that problem, figure out who the competitors are in that market, figure out the market share, and then really dig into the problem, and then build your solution specifically based on what you know the gap is inside of the existing solutions and the problems. Because I think that that's a huge issue. When you look into any of the HCM marketplaces, under every single category, there are like 30 people that are inside of that category. Oh, we're a bin admin system, and so it's a bunch of bin admins in there, right? We have carved out a lane where they have had to design a name for what it is that we do inside of all of the partnerships, and we've got one that's already done, sealed, signed We've got 5 more that we're working on right now, and each of them are having to find a place to put us and build new APIs just so that we can have access to their systems. That's a solution. That's a gap. And so that's what I encourage people to find where they fit in.
That's incredible. One of one. A one of one. That's
Absolutely.
An important thing. Well, Gia, thank you so much for being with us. Certainly enjoy the conversation. Have enjoyed, obviously, watching your journey over the last, I think we're at 7, 8 years now of watching what's happening as you're growing first Morale Resource and now Auditocity. I know we are delighted to continue to see what happens as you scale and you move forward. So thank you for sharing your founder story with us. If you are interested in learning about other founder stories, you can check out our Coffee Chat series. It's the 3rd Wednesday of every month at 8:30 a.m. You can also find those replays on Facebook and probably Instagram and YouTube and other channels that are out there sharing that information. Make sure you tune in next month. We're going to hear from Kathleen Hale, COO of Builders and Backers. She is a former partner with 1776, one of those venture firms in the DC market. And she also is the founder and she was the founder and CEO of a company called Rebel Desk. So we'll get a chance to hear her story. But thank you so much for joining with us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.